Hello, my dear friends. You're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 21st of October of 2025. Today we have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first, we're going to talk about Hungary because the most important updates are coming from this area when talking about political updates. So, according to information we have, somebody attacked two oil refineries in the previous 24 hours. Serious incidents hit two refineries in 24 hours. Overnight Monday, a fire broke out at MOL's plant in Hungary, and hours earlier, an explosion struck the Petrotel, Lukoil refinery in Romania. MOL's facility in Hungary is Hungary's largest and most modern. It receives Russian oil via the Barastak pipeline. The Romanian plant, owned by Russia's Lukoil, processes 2.5 million tons a year, one of Romania's biggest. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban wrote on social media, "This morning I consulted with MOL's management and the Minister of the Interior. Hungary's fuel supply is secure. The circumstances of the fire at the refinery will be investigated as strictly as possible." So this is a statement that was made by Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, and this is another video that came today from Hungary. As you can see, very heavy explosion, very heavy fire took place on the territory of the oil refinery that belongs to the Russian Federation or that uses Russian oil. So, and this is very suspicious. So, as you can see, during the previous 24 hours, few more objects of critical infrastructure of not of Ukraine but of the European Union was attacked by somebody. One of these critical infrastructural object is located on the territory of Hungary, and this oil refinery uses the Russian oil, and another one was attacked on the territory of Romania. But when talking about this one, this oil refinery belongs to the Russian Federation. And of course, when talking about these attacks and when talking about Russia as the main owner of these assets, of course, everybody has just one title, just one state in their minds who can did this. And this is a very important situation. Why is that? As Viktor Orban stated, he will try to investigate this situation as strictly as possible. And if somehow, let's say, special forces and special investigators of Romania and Hungary are able to find or connect Ukraine and Ukrainian special forces with these two attacks, then this is going to be something like the fifth article of NATO. Isn't it? Because all these objects, all these refineries are located on the territory of NATO countries. And if Hungarians are able to prove that this attack was carried by Ukraine, so why then, for example, Hungarians cannot use the fourth or the fifth article of NATO? For example, if you remember several weeks ago, according to information we have, some drones crossed the border between Ukraine and Poland, and they fell down on the territory of Poland, and as a result of that situation, Poland, for example, called for the fourth article of the NATO agreement, and there were several consultations. And if you remember, during those consultations, the Western countries and the NATO countries blamed the Russian Federation in that situation. So the question is why the Hungarians cannot do the same today. And this is very interesting because if this situation will repeat, we're gonna see that most likely Russia and its allies are trying to show the Western population, the European population, that in the special military operation, in this war, in these all things between Europe and Russia is not the only aggressor. And according to this position, according to this, let's say, situation, we see that the Russian Federation is trying to show the Western countries and the European Union that Ukraine is also a side who can probably deal some damage and who can bring some problems to the population of the European Union. So anyway, let's wait and see. Let's wait for this investigation, and it's very interesting whether the Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban, will use the fourth article of NATO for consultations. Anyway, during these days, we got a few more updates from the territory of Hungary. Today, for example, we got report that Rubio and Lavrov will arrive in Budapest for in-person meeting on October 30th. This information was provided by the Financial Times. According to a German source from the publication, there is an expectation that Orban will outline his plans regarding the Trump-Putin summit, including a possible meeting of Europeans with the US president, but there is no confirmation yet. Earlier, the Kremlin denied rumors about the rescheduling of the Rubio and Lavrov meeting and added that the date has not yet been agreed upon, while Deputy Foreign Minister Ryabkov emphasized that Russia will continue to face Western resource disinformation. So this is a very interesting piece of news because, as you know, currently there are lots of questions how exactly the Russians are planning to enter Hungary. There are lots of roads to do this through Poland, through Romania, through Ukraine, through Bulgaria, through, let's say, neutral waters, through Turkey and so on. And today some Polish authorities stated that Russia will not be able to use their airspace for these purposes. Poland has threatened to arrest Vladimir Putin if his plane enters Polish airspace. Polish Foreign Minister Radoslav Sikorski made the statement in an interview with Radio Rodina, as reported by Reuters. So this is a very interesting situation. Furthermore, today we got report that most likely Bulgaria will provide Russians their airspace for these purposes. Bulgaria is ready to provide an air corridor for the Russian president's plane en route to Budapest, according to the foreign minister Georgiev. So this is very interesting, and if this information is correct and is true, then most likely the Russians will be able to fly in the direction of Hungary through Bulgaria, Serbia, and then Russians will be able to enter Hungary. But telling the truth, I'm not sure that Russians are going to use the Black Sea for these purposes, the airspace above the Black Sea, because it is very dangerous. The Ukrainians are very close to this area, and we don't forget about the United Kingdom Special Forces. So everything is possible if Putin decides to use airspace above the Black Sea for these purposes. Anyway, let's wait and see what is going to be next. But obviously, this is going to be a very interesting political game between the United States of America, the Russian Federation, and the European Union. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground in Ukraine, and first let's talk about the Zaporozhye direction. Once again, let's start with the Orekhov offensive operation. According to information we have, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians carry out another offensive operation, this time using lots of mechanized vehicles, infantry fighting vehicles, armored vehicles, and tanks, with the purpose to break through Ukrainian defense and to capture the settlement of Mala-Takhmachka. In this video that was published by the way by pro-Ukrainian sources, we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians with FPV drones during that attack. As a result of these counterattacks, as you can see, that were carried out by Ukrainians, lots of vehicles of the armored forces of the Russian Federation were destroyed. But despite the fact that many vehicles were destroyed, the Russians managed to get this point. And now it's clear what exactly the Russians were trying to achieve. The Russians, as a result of this offensive, managed to outflank the former prison, which is located in the southeastern part of the settlement of Mala-Takhmachka, and currently the sources are saying that the Russians are digging in deeper. The Russians are clearing the central and the eastern parts of the settlement of Mala-Takhmachka. The Russians are clearing mainly basements across the village, across the settlement. As soon as the Russians finish this clearing operation, they will try to take in pincers the former prison with the purpose to take this territory under complete control as well. This former prison is a very important position. It's basically a strategical position in this direction, and if Russians are able to dig in deeper on these territories, most likely the Ukrainians will never be able to force the Russians to fall back from this territory again. And the thing is that I'm not even sure whether the Russians are planning to advance further in the direction of the city of Orekhov. It seems that the Russians began this offensive operation just with one purpose: to move further in the northern direction towards the road TO814. This is the road I'm talking about, because this is a very important road between the city of Orekhov and the settlement by the name of Gulai Polya. And as you may know, the Russians are currently advancing in the direction of the city of Gulai Polya, and it is very important for the Russians that the logistic between Orekhov and Gulai Polya is under complete Russian fire control or even physical control. Because when Russians begin their major offensive operation, they want to be 100% sure that Ukrainians have no supply and support in this area and that their contingent is without any help from the mainland. As for this direction, during the previous 24 hours, nothing special was recorded, just small changes on the ground around the settlement of Uspenovka and Poltavka, small changes on the ground, of course, in Russian favor. The Russians continue their offensive operation in this direction. Few more square kilometers of fields and tree lines were captured by the armed forces of the Russian Federation. The Ukrainians are not able to stabilize the situation, and most likely within 5 days or so, the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back from the settlement of Uspenovka in the southwestern direction towards the settlement of Gulai Polya. And from this very moment, the Russians may begin their major offensive operation in the same direction with the purpose to take under control the city of Gulai Polya. And by the time the Russians get the outskirts of this settlement, it is very important that Russians establish complete control over the TO 814 road, because if Ukrainians save control over this logistic, it will be very difficult for the armed forces of the Russian Federation to capture the city of Gulai Polya. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Pokrovsk direction. During the previous 24 hours, we have small changes. As we discussed in the previous video, up to 80% of the settlement of the southern part of the city of Pokrovsk is being colored either in Russian favor or as a contested area. We continue receiving different updates and different statements and reports about the situation on the ground. The Russians control almost entire railways in the central part. The Russians control the railway station. Furthermore, according to different mappers, the Russians secured the industrial zone in the northwestern part of the settlement. Furthermore, the Russians managed to cross the railways, and now the Russians are trying to concentrate their forces and their units on the Ukrainian side of the railways. Obviously, it will take 1, 2, 3 days for these consolidations, and as soon as the Russians are able to concentrate a critical mass in this area, they will continue offensive operation further in the northern direction or in the direction of this industrial zone that is located in the vicinity of the railways. And if Russians are able to take under control just a few more square kilometers from this part of the city of Pokrovsk, this is going to be the end of the entire Pokrovsk agglomeration. The Ukrainians will not be able to hold their positions in the city of Mirnograd and especially in the southern part, and sooner or later the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back. Furthermore, during the previous 24 hours, we got small changes on the ground in the southeastern part of the Pokrovsk agglomeration. This video today was published by pro-Ukrainian resources, and here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation on the eastern part of the settlement of Promin. Based on this video, we made small corrections of the map. So we see that most likely in coming days, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will confirm complete control over the territory, and then the Russians will be able to begin their full-scale offensive operation in the southern part of the city of Mirnograd, which most likely by the time the Russians launch this offensive would be completely or almost empty without Ukrainian soldiers, because we understand that Ukrainians understand that it's time to begin retreating and regrouping with the purpose to stay as close as possible to the main evacuation roads, because if they don't do this, most likely they would be caught in cauldron. And if they can stay as close as possible to the evacuation roads, this means that they will have at least some chances for successful evacuation. These chances are very slow already, but at least it's better than nothing. At the same time, the Russians continue hunting and destroying vehicles that Ukrainians are sending in the direction of the Pokrovsk agglomeration, but as we can see, for example, according to this video, a vehicle was trying to get to the city of Mirnograd and the city of Pokrovsk, but was destroyed several kilometers to the city itself, so which means that there is no access to this area from Ukrainian side. Furthermore, the Russians improved their positions in the northeastern part of the settlement of Rodinska. Few more blocks were captured by Russia, and currently there are just several meters between edge Russian positions and the city limits and the border of the city limits of the city of Rodinska, just 500 meters, and Russians will be able to get TT of 515 road. And from this very moment, we're gonna start talking about real cauldron in the Pokrovsk direction. Some sources are saying that Ukrainians will be able to hold their positions in the city of Pokrovsk for another 2, 3, or 4 months, but I'm not sure about this. It seems that Ukrainians would be forced to fall back from this area within weeks or maybe even days. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Syria's Liman direction. During the previous 24 hours, the most important updates are coming from the eastern part of the city. According to information we have, the Russians improved their positions in the fields and managed to get as close as possible to the southeastern part of the settlement. Most likely tomorrow we're gonna receive additional changes on the ground, and it probably during the next 4 or 5 days. Most of the sources will confirm that Russians entered the city limits of the city of Liman, and this is going to be a very important piece of news. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians are currently storming the settlement of Stavki. There are very heavy clashes right now. The Russians reported that they managed to enter this territory this morning, so most likely tomorrow we're going to get additional details about the situation on the ground. Furthermore, the Russians improved their positions in the northern part of the settlement of Drobusheva. Today, a few more blocks and constructions were captured by Russia along the main street of 527 road, and the Russians continue advancing further in the southeastern direction. So it seems that the Russians will begin assault operation on the city of Liman from 3 directions during November of 2025. As for the city of Kupiansk, the situation remains tense for the armed forces of Ukraine. The Russians have established complete control over the main supply lines. During the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians were trying to send additional reinforcements and reserves in the direction of the city of Kupiansk-Uzlavoy, but everything that was approaching the river of Oskol was destroyed by Russians with FPV drones. In this video, we can see another example. The Ukrainians were trying to bring additional reinforcements and some vehicles or supply on the territory of the Kupiansk agglomeration, but this vehicle was destroyed along the river of Oskol. So Ukrainians haven't managed to enter the city limits, which means that currently the Ukrainians are absolutely without any supply and support from the mainland. At the same time, the Russians continue bombing and attacking the settlement of Kupiansk and the settlements of Kevsharovka. In this video, we can see how Russians destroyed several temporal deployment points on the territory of Kevsharovka, most likely FPV drone operator bases. Very interesting updates are coming from the settlement of Vovchansk, and it seems that a turning point in the battle for this area has happened. During the previous 24 hours, the pro-Russian sources published this video. And here we can see how a Russian soldier dropped a grenade or bomb on the position of the armed forces of Ukraine in the northern part of the settlement of Sinelnikovo. And then there was a very heavy explosion, as you can see. So this episode took place exactly at this point, and based on this video we came to the conclusion that the assault groups of the armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to went through the settlement of Vovchansk over its western part, and the Russians managed to enter the northern part of the settlement of Sinelnikovo, which means that currently the clashes are already taking place outside of the city limits of Vovchansk, which is very important, which means that at some positions, at some points, the city of Vovchansk is already behind Russian forces. So the next target is the settlement of Sinelnikovo, Tsegelnya, and then Russians will try to attack the settlement of Vilcha. This is the last settlement, more or less big settlement, before the Russians are able to enter the operational space of the Kharkiv region. And as soon as the Russians enter this special area, this operational space, then from this very moment the Russians may begin their major offensive operation, and then we might see in the northeastern part of the Kharkiv region the same story that we can see right now on the entire and across the entire Zaporozhye direction. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.